Welcome, everyone, to the Victory and Reseda Quarterly Report and Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm George Torline.
And I'm Randy Stern.
And on today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at some of the vehicles that we worked with over the last quarter. And we'll take a look at the vehicles that we have for long-term use, which is a 2021 Mazda CX-5 and a 2019 Volkswagen Golf R. A little spoiler, one of them got a check engine light. We'll see which one it was. But first, it's that time of year again. It's time to determine what vehicle will be the 2023 Vehicle of the Year. So with that, Randy, tell us about the Vehicle of the Year voting.
That's right. Today, we're about to announce the long list of nominees for hashtag Voti 2023, the 2023 Victory and Reseda Vehicle of the Year Award, a tradition that we like to uphold. We've been I think we're in our 16th year that we're awarding this award. But, you know, every year gets a little bit more important, a little bit more difficult to navigate. However, this year we've got 39 nominees to go through from 11 manufacturers. So without further ado, let's dive in.
Yeah, let's go through the list real quick then. Want to go ahead and start?
Absolutely. All right. The nominees for the 2023 Victory and Reseda Vehicle of the Year Award, hashtag Voti 2023, are the Acura MDX,
The Alfa Romeo Giulia,
the Alfa Romeo Tonale,
the Chevrolet Equinox,
the Chrysler Pacifica,
the Ford Bronco,
the Ford Maverick,
the Genesis G90,
Genesis GV70,
Honda Accord,
Honda CR-V,
Honda HR-V,
Honda Pilot, Hyundai Santa Fe,
Jeep Cherokee,
Jeep Grand Cherokee,
the Kia Niro,
the Lexus ES,
Lexus RX,
Lexus RZ,
Lincoln Corsair,
Mazda CX-30,
Mazda CX-9,
Mazda CX-90,
Mazda 3,
Ram Heavy Duty,
Range Rover Sport,
Subaru Crosstrek,
Toyota Camry,
Toyota Corolla,
Toyota Grand Highlander,
Toyota RAV4,
Toyota Sequoia,
Toyota Tacoma,
Toyota Venza,
Volkswagen Atlas,
Volkswagen Golf GTI.
and the Volvo S60.
That's a list.
That's a heck of a list. In previous years, we had as many as 60
Wow.
nominees. So luckily with 39, we didn't bore everybody. But the next step going forward today is that we're now going to get all the scores aggregated. We also got a panel of colleagues that will be helping us out with their votes. And also we got to count all the social media traffic. So fun stuff. So we will take this all the way to November. And around November 11th, we're going to let you vote. And you're going to be voting for 5 out of those 39. And we'll be announcing those around November 10th. I don't have the dates in front of me, but it's important to know that coming soon, you'll be able to get a chance to vote for 5 finalists. And one with the most votes becomes hashtag Voti 2023.
That's right. And I believe the announcement date will be around November 17th or 19th, somewhere in there.
Somewhere around there, yeah. To read the entire list and also go over the timeline of the of Voti 2023, do yourselves a favor, go on the web, log on to victoryandreseda.net to read everything that we have done for this particular publication.
That's right. All the reviews for all the individual vehicles that we looked at are out there, and the timeline for the voting and when people will be able to vote, when you'll be able to vote, and when the winner will be announced.
And don't forget our social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook. So if you follow along with those, we'll have the live ballot for you for Voti 2023. Oh, and by the way, we're also on LinkedIn.
That's right.
That's right. So we'll be doing all of the important announcements on our LinkedIn as well. And we'd like to connect with you on top of that. So go ahead and follow us on LinkedIn if you're a professional and you like to see what we're doing.
That's right. Another great resource that's out there is LinkedIn. People don't think about that as social media, but it is.
It is, but it's more concentrated. I mean, we can have a great conversation about social media, maybe on another quarterly podcast.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on Vody?
No, that's it. That's your long list. Stay tuned for the 5 finalists.
Awesome. Favorite time of the year. So
Yep.
To reflect upon the previous year and all the vehicles. So.
Well, the previous decade plus, actually.
Right. All right. So we'll transition over to the vehicles of our long-term fleet. So that's the 2019 Volkswagen Golf R and the 2021 Mazda CX-5. And so I hinted earlier that one of them got a check engine light, and it wasn't the Volkswagen.
Shocker.
I know.
I mean, what's even more shocking, it's the Mazda that got the CEL.
Of all things.
Yeah.
Right? So here's kind of the story with that. I decided to find out, well, what is the code that's being thrown that's showing us the check engine light? So I brought it over to an auto parts store, which they give you the little scan tool that you can plug in and find out what the code is. Did that, came up with P0054, which hinted that the O2 sensor for the first O2 sensor was out of range or out of spec, wasn't heating up, that kind of thing. And they thought, well, okay, well, that tells me that something I need to bring back to the dealer to have them take a look at. So made an appointment to bring it in, thought, oh, it's probably just an O2 sensor. In and out same day, easy peasy, no big deal. Wrong.
Boy, were we wrong.
Wrong. So their troubleshooting steps that they use was to replace the catalytic converter. I mean, we only have 20,000 miles on that thing. So how could it have a bad catalytic converter?
That's what everyone's been saying is that, wait a minute, it's a 2-year-old vehicle. It's got 20,000 on the clock. What's going on? I mean, why are you replacing the catalytic converter this early on in the car's life?
And one of the service advisor's explanation was, well, it was built during COVID, so maybe the parts were suspect, but that didn't fix it. So they went to replace an O2 sensor, broke the said O2 sensor, replaced that. That didn't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Then they went to the other O2 sensor, the downstream O2 sensor, replaced that. That didn't fix it. So they started poking around a little bit more and pulled the wiring and kind of searched back a little bit. And they found exposed wires that plugs into one of the O2 sensors. And they thought, that must be it. And it's an odd spot because it's underneath the panels where you've got the acoustic panels underneath there, on the underside of the vehicle. When you would take a look at it, you can see the copper of one of the things. The wiring is all wrapped up in like in a wrapper. Then there's the individual wires that run through that. But at the end of where it's wrapped, they're exposed for the individual cables.
Mm-hmm.
And chances are the wires are probably soy-based, which critters apparently find appealing, right?
Which started a whole bunch of questions. It's like, okay, so how does a critter get in that area? What size of critter would get into that area?
Well, first of all, there's a pretty good size hole or two in the bottom of that insulation pan that critters can get into. But in the back, the whole back is open, so squirrels can get in there, no problem. So it's unfortunately where the vehicle is parked at my place is kind of like an interstate for squirrel traffic because a neighbor likes to feed animals. So I have a lot of rodent traffic going through here.
And same at my place where, there's a parking pad that's at the back of the house, and there's been everything, squirrels, rabbits. I mean, a whole bunch of animals that are flying through.
And this was the next day after picking up the vehicle from getting the trim work fixed from the windshield repair.
Mm-hmm.
And it sat there for 2 days. So that's another possibility too.
There are plenty of other possibilities, to be honest. But we've got to the point where, okay, what do we got to do to get this fixed?
Yeah. So it came down to, well, they need to replace that connector, which has the exposed wiring. And they said, well, if you can find that connector like in a junkyard, we can just replace that and splice that in. So the wire is molded into the connector, so it's not a pinned connector. So taking a look at the connector, so this comes down through the bottom of the vehicle, and this is the wire that got chewed on. So it's kind of hard to see from here, but we'll do a close-up on that. So this is the connector that has the broken connection here, as well as exposed wiring that got nibbled on. So the problem with this is that you can't just replace this connector easily. You really need to replace the whole wire. So this comes down into the underside of the vehicle, and then it goes into the vehicle. So this is a little insulator for that, for weather. But then this is part of the wiring harness of the car. It's the whole wiring harness of the rear of the vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what?
You can't replace just this because it's attached to
Everything else.
all of this. It's the whole freaking wiring harness for the back of the car. The whole thing has to be replaced. For those listening at home, I just lugged about 10 feet of car wiring onto the table here, which was into the vehicle. So that means they had to dismantle a good part of the interior to get at that, and the underside. Fortunately, it wasn't the entire wiring harness. It's got it's got parts of it that, is still behind. But, I mean, jeepers, we've got a fuse block in there, and it's a substantial piece. So they had this in the shop for a total of a month to get this fixed. And while figuring this out, I mean, that was a good 2 weeks. And then the other 2 weeks was, the time that they spent fixing it. Meanwhile, they gave us a loaner, thankfully. And we used that quite a bit to get around. But in the meantime...
Welcome to Modern Automotive Engineering. If you're not watching this... You're not missing much, honestly. There's a lot of wires, insulation, connectors. Looks like a fuse set up there.
There's a fuse block in there.
I mean, it's a mess.
Yeah. And cars are becoming more electronic, more drive-by-wire for things. There's cars now that are coming out that are steer-by-wire, brake-by-wire. So less mechanical and more wiring. And everything is soy-based because they want to be environmentally friendly. So this is going to be more of a problem.
Especially when you're talking about how much these repairs cost. And, we're not going to tell everybody how much the repair costs because we want you sitting down and enjoying the rest of the podcast. However, that's not the worst thing I've seen.
Well, I'm fine with telling them how much it costs.
Fine, tell them. Hopefully you're sitting down, folks.
The original estimate was $6,586. But because insurance was involved, they were able to get it down to $6,156 or something like that. So still a $6,000 repair.
Exactly. It's a 4-digit repair, which are becoming common. There it goes. All right. Which is becoming very common in today's complex electronic automobiles today, even trucks. I mean, and lately I've been hearing about repairs going into the 5-digit range, which is absolutely mind-boggling.
Which could easily total a vehicle at some point.
Exactly. Especially when you're talking about, give you a good example. Now, of course, the second-gen Priuses and first-gen Priuses, they still have the battery pack, even 20 years on. Now, they're warranted for 10 years. So the question comes up, okay, so what happens when that battery pack becomes unusable? You can't recharge it anymore, and you have to you can't just replace a battery, a piece of a battery. You have to replace the entire pack. So now when you're talking about vehicles that are going to have these very expensive repairs, and when the cost of repair equals to the actual blue book value of that vehicle, oh boy, looks like people are going to say, well, gee, we over-engineered the vehicles these days. I mean, they're just, it's truly obsolete.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much complexity with the vehicles this day and age with electronics. It's really something to be sure you got enough insurance for it. And hopefully something big like this doesn't come up and end up having to total the vehicle, which would just be a shame. Just for something as simple as just a little wire from a road nippling on it. And that would be all it would take.
So we got the entire thing fixed by the dealership. However, you did more.
I did?
Yes, you did.
Oh, yes, I did. Gosh. So now that it's fixed, how do you stop them from coming back and doing the same thing? So, as Bugs Bunny would say, this means war. So what I did was, well, one, as you saw where the spiral insulation was on the wire, they didn't go for that. They only did the exposed wires that are just, like 1/4 of an inch on the end. So I went in and put dielectric sealant on the ends of all of those, so those won't be exposed. Then I came in and found, asking around on the internet about what could be done to shield the wires a little bit better. And one recommendation was a tape that Honda makes of all manufacturers. They have a genuine Honda part that is not appetizing to mice. Apparently, if they chew into it, they get a real hot, spicy sensation or something like that. So I went underneath there, wrapped all the wires in this mouse-resistant tape, so it will make it resistant to them. And then I'm going through and putting in, covering the holes in that insulation plate, that sound insulation panel, and then we'll cover up the entry points with a moldable plastic that will keep them out of there for the most part. If they really want to get in there, it's almost impossible to get them to stop, but it'll make it less inviting, and that's about the best you can do.
Which brings us another point about all this is that some of us keep our cars outside, and some of us even garage our cars. Now, little do we know that sometimes not just critters are running around on the outside, there's also critters that are in the inside of a garage as well. We've seen so many YouTube videos for which somebody will do a barn find, and all of a sudden they found that a whole bunch of mice have made their home underneath the hood. So no matter how you slice it, you got to find a way to protect your vehicle. So I'm not saying go out to a Honda dealer and find this tape, which is weird to me. I'm still processing the fact that we use a Honda part on a Mazda.
Me too.
Yep. But, if you have a rodent or a critter situation at your home or wherever you live, find a way to protect your vehicle. The solution may be simple or maybe a little bit more complicated, but do the steps that you need to take in order to protect your vehicle from anything and everything, including critters.
Right. And keep the garage clean so that they don't have places where they would want to set up shop. Keep the garage door closed so they won't have the opportunity to get in easily. So it's really important to, keep those away from your vehicles because it's an expensive repair.
Absolutely. It's just like the old Fram commercial, either pay me now or pay me later.
Right. So as far as outside of that, because the vehicle was at the dealership for a good month, it didn't see as many miles in this quarter. So looking at the stats, we drove it 1,113 miles since the last update, and our gas mileage for the period was a little bit lower. It was 25.46 miles to the gallon because we really didn't have any road trips this time around. When we went to Chicago, we used the loaner. So we were planning on using RV&R machine, but we ended up taking the dealership's CX-5. So that brings us to an overall average to date of 25.67 miles to gallon of our ownership overall average miles per gallon.
And based on some of the reviews that I've had with that particular engine of the CX-5, it's in line with what I've been observing those times before. Of course, I don't want to throw in the turbos that I've driven because it's not a turbo. So, but yeah, we saw practically almost the same in the loaner as well.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent between the two. And considering how hot the summer was and running the AC, it didn't really seem to impact it a whole lot. So it seemed to be fairly efficient with the AC side of it.
Right. And also to note that the loaner CX-5 was a 23 in the premium grade, and it uses the same engine as our V&R machine. So there's really no difference in performance.
Yep. So that's the story on our CX-5, and hopefully it'll be smooth sailing going forward. Yeah, knock on for Micah. But as far as the Volkswagen Golf R, really nothing noteworthy on that. So didn't need to do any maintenance on that. Didn't drive it a whole lot, but it's been great. So no issues and no updates on the Golf R. So that's good.
You know, the one thing about the Golf R is that I was prodding you to take it to what we're going to be talking about next. But as we found that with the CX-5, it's more practical. It carries a lot more stuff. Now we got a lot more stuff to carry.
Yeah. We had some cargo to, gear and things, equipment.
Right. And, I mean, there's a little bit of difference, maybe about, less than 10 cubic feet of space between the Golf R and the CX-5. So, I mean, I think we made the right decision.
And getting in and out, that's always a bit of a chore with the Golf R. But, hey, once you're in, the seats are great. So it's that trade-off. So as far as things coming up, next few weeks here, we'll need to put snow tires on, being that it's going to be snow season here in Minnesota. So we'll put those on the CX-5, the Michelins, the X-Ice, and we'll enjoy those to get around in. But moving on, we'll talk about what we used the loaner for from the dealer. We drove that down to Chicago.
Yes, we did. Well, actually, on the west burbs of Chicago. There were two events that were back-to-back that the Midwest Automotive Media Association were involved. The first event was called the Fall Favorites Festival, which Mama has decided to change its family car of the year to multiple awards, which we presented at the 2024 Chicago Auto Show, along with Voti 2023. What it is, it's a smaller gathering. It's a smaller version of what they've done in the past, which was called the Fall Rally back in the day when I was first a member of Mama. But what they did is I'll jump into that, is that we went to a place called the Donata House, which is part of this forest preserve in Wheaton, Illinois. So we're talking about west of Chicago. Beautiful place. I mean, a beautiful home. I mean, it's a horse ranch. If you call it a ranch out in Chicago, but it's, I mean, it was a great, great location.
A terrific event venue to hold something like this.
Absolutely. So we had about maybe 20, 25 vehicles available to us during that Wednesday. And they did split it up in 4-hour stints for all of us, and I mean, they split with two groups, and we were part of the early group, and we had a chance to drive a plethora of interesting vehicles.
And the thing that was not interesting, but the unique about this grouping of vehicles was
that none of them are electrified. Okay, except for one, but most of them were not electrified.
Right. This grouping was all internal combustion vehicles, as the next day there was an event for doing just electric vehicles.
Absolutely. On Thursday, we went to the media preview of the Chicago Drives Electric, which is brought to you by the Chicago Auto Show producers, the Chicago Auto Trade Association. And it's their way of engaging with Chicagoland area consumers, a plethora of not just battery electric EVs, but also plug-in hybrids and even some hybrids as well.
So before we delve into that event, let's rewind back to the Fall Favorites Festival and touch on some of the vehicles that we drove. So
what ones stood out for you the most?
Well, I got a chance to drive the new 2024 Ford Mustang Dark Horse, which has the 6-speed manual transmission. Got that out and get a chance to experience the Mustang and the noise that it makes. And that was just a joy to drive. So the transmission I thought was just a tad notchy. So, but other than that, it was a fun driving car. And then I was able to drive back to back the Honda Civic Type R and the Acura Integra Type S back to back. And since they share the same powertrain, they're different vehicles because the Integra is really much more of a softer vehicle. It's quieter, it's more comfortable, it's got more creature comforts. So if you're looking for that kind of a vehicle, but you want something that's a bit softer and more of the adult kind of a vehicle without the big spoiler, do the Integra. If you want something that's a little bit more harder edge, then get the Civic. So it was great to be able to do those back to back. What was some of your favorites that you drove?
Glad you asked. First of the list, the 2023 Chrysler 300C, which is basically the finale of the LX2 platform. And I love it. I love it. I mean, I try to make excuses for the LX2, even though people say it's not as refined as other vehicles that you could spend the same kind of money in. But you know what? If you are a Moparian at heart, this is the car that you really want to drive. And so fitting farewell, because the next generation, there'll be battery electric versions of the next, of the replacement, wherever they're going to be built at Bramley. Yeah, it was a great car to send off. It's the 392 that's underneath the hood, 6.4 liter Hemi, 485 horsepower. Come on, this car is awesome. It's the sound of fury.
Yeah, the sound that thing makes is just incredible.
Absolutely, and I'm more the muscle car guy among the both of us, so I enjoy things like this. We actually had a chance to drive some vehicles together. One was the new Chevy Trax, which, by the way, is the hottest vehicle that GM has had in years because it's inexpensive, it's small enough. Strangely enough, it's got a 1.2 liter 3-cylinder turbocharged engine that's only front-wheel drive, but everyone's snapping them up like crazy.
Yeah, they're roomy. We had 3 passengers in there, and we were all quite comfortable, and it drove well.
Absolutely. Shout out to Tom Appel from Consumer Guide. He was joining us in the back seat. So it's an interesting vehicle. Then you and I commandeered a 2024 Jeep Wrangler 392 Rubicon.
Right, and that's a hoot. Again, with the same vein of those high-powered Hemi vehicles, where you got that big motor in the little Wrangler, and it makes all that crazy noise and has that crazy performance, and it's really a fun vehicle.
It is. I mean, let's put it this way. If you're doing some serious off-roading and you got this car, you might be the first one to the top of the mountain.
Absolutely.
Pretty much.
Plenty of power. Yeah.
Right. Let's switch to Chicago Drives Electric, and I want to know what stood out for you.
Boy, I drove the Audi RS e-tron, and that was a lot of fun. So that is Audi's performance electric vehicle right now. It's just a lot of fun. You'll easily want to kick the tail out, even when you're not in the crazy performance modes. But it'll still smush your face back into the seat, and it's just a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I saw you drove it, and I went, interesting. I've seen a few of those on the road. For me, really nothing kind of stood out, I'm afraid. I've driven maybe a couple of vehicles. The one vehicle that we were in was the Cadillac LYRIQ,
Yep.
which I think my big problem is that I come from it. We both come from the same era of Cadillac, where we expect Cadillac to be these big 230-inch floaty boats with all this luxury and cushiness and classic design, classic elements, etc. And now we're presented with this new electric Cadillac SUV crossover, and it's digital. But there are a few elements I pointed out that said, oh, I remember this from, say, a 1970 Coupe de Ville.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is manufacturers want some features to draw customers to the vehicles. So they want them to be a little bit more distinctive and unique, either by design, with lighting, through features, in multiple different ways. And we're seeing that, I think, in some of these vehicles like the LYRIQ.
Absolutely. Which will probably transition to our next segment, which will go over some of the vehicles we've recently driven and worked with.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the vehicles that we worked with in the last quarter.
Okay. I want to start off with something jumping off of what you've mentioned about the engineering and design. Over-engineering is probably the best thing to say. Is right down the street from Chicago Drives Electric, Fisker set up a consumer drive event for their new Ocean, and which is a smaller SUV that this is the second go-around for Henrik Fisker and his company. The first go-around became Karma Automotive, as everybody will follow along, because they had the Fisker Karma, and then Fisker bailed out of the business, got sold to a consortium, and now it's called Karma, and the Karma Rivero is, anyway. So the Fisker is a reboot of his automotive production career. There's one word that I wrote down that describes this vehicle.
And what's that?
Meh.
Meh?
Meh. I'll tell you why, because I guess these startup vehicles like a gimmick. They love giving you gimmicks. And there's so many gimmicks in that Fisker Ocean. I was over it.
Yeah, it had some interesting things. I thought the solar elements in the roof was kind of interesting, but the windows on the back windows, not just the passengers in the back, but the back cargo area windows went down.
In one button.
Yeah.
And again, they're using a big touchscreen. This one's about 17 inches big.
Monster big, yes.
Monster big. And although, yes, there's instrumentation in front of you, it's a small little screen, about the same screen as you'll find, say, on the Ford Mustang Mach-E. But again, it's like Tesla. Almost everything is controlled on that screen. In order for you to use, some of the controls are on the steering wheel.
Right. And instead of buttons, you have to go to the screen to get basic features done, which is not ideal.
Absolutely. The thing was heavy. It drove like a brick. Those wheels are horrendous.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give Fisker a pass. I mean, look, you're starting up again. I get what you're trying to do, especially when you're starting from under 40 grand for your most basic vehicle. That particular vehicle, the Fisker One, ran about over 70.
Wow.
Yeah, because you get everything that under the sun, everything that Fisker will throw into it from their Magna plant in Austria, where all these vehicles are coming from. It's a contract plant that Magna runs, and that's where the GR Supra and the Z4 are built. But to me, it's just, I get what you're doing, but there are better vehicles out there that don't give you that much level of complication, but be able to achieve the same result.
I will say that if you're shopping for a vehicle in this segment and you want something that's different, that you're not really going to find one of these around, perhaps something to consider because it's very unique and you're probably not going to be mistaken for a different vehicle. It's just very unique.
It's out there.
It's out there. Yes.
It's out there. Yeah. George, let's go to you. You had plenty of time with the next vehicle on our list, which is the Mark 8 Golf GTI by Volkswagen.
Yes. So the GTI, the 2023, we had this in the S trim, which is just the most basic trim with no options, except had the DSG transmission. And yeah, I had a good amount of time to drive that. And boy, the GTI has really come a long way, I think, because with the addition of the limited slip front differential, being able to put the power down much more effectively these days, it really improves the vehicle compared to in previous years when they didn't have that. The innermost wheel would spin if you're putting power down while you're turning, which would make you want to just buy a Golf R with all-wheel drive. And that's kind of what I did, is I bought the Golf R because at the time, the GTI didn't put the power down very well when you really lean into the throttle. But now it's really quite good, surprisingly good.
I would agree with you. I mean, GTI is one of the most fun you can have in a Mark 8 Golf. And I have to admit that the Mark 8 Golfs, you've driven the Golf R, which the video you can find up there somewhere. Yep. Everyone knocks the Golf Mark 8 for having some things that are pretty complicated, such as the infotainment system and a few other details here and there. But engineering-wise and mechanically, they've really improved the breed. And especially when you're talking about this particular GTI celebrates 40 years in America. I mean, 50 plus years is a worldwide sensation. So, and it spanned all of the 8 generations. So you have to give it, staying power, cred, but this is a much better GTI than ever.
Yeah, even Jeremy Clarkson owned one. So, for someone who really, has a taste in vehicles, that says something, I think. Now, with the one we had with the lowest spec, you mentioned the infotainment being an issue. And yes, in the higher specs with the larger infotainment system, with the haptic touch, this one didn't have that. It still had the volume knob and it was much more manageable. Now for 2024, they're changing that out to a redesigned system. So the 2024, the 8.5 GTI will fix some of those things and also bring along some extra features. So I'm curious to see that when those come about. But ours, I thought, was just what you needed with the basic features. The knobs gave you the basic controls that you needed, and that was all very appreciated.
I concur, and I will say that the least complicated your vehicle is, the more fun you're going to have. And that's exactly what we got out of this GTI-S.
Yeah, and that spec with you got the plaid seats.
Oh, yeah, the tartan.
Yeah, and and it still had a lot of tech, a lot of driver safety aids, and you didn't feel like you had a lot of compromise. So they really gave you a lot of features, but the starting price is much higher than what it used to be a few years ago, because you could get a more stripped down equipment-wise GTI for a much lower price. But now the way they're speccing them with all these extra options as standard, that also brought the price up as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but fortunately that's also the reality of our automotive market. So anyway, onward to the next one. I'll jump on this one. The 2023 Honda Accord. Wow. Much better than I liked. I mean, they did a lot of things to it for this new generation model that I anticipated them to do eventually, because the last one was a bit ugly. It was a little complicated. However, the key element of the new Accord is a brand new hybrid system that we experienced in the CRV. Video you could check out somewhere up there. It's same driveline. It's like a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine with 3 electric motors, including the third one being a traction motor. And it really transforms the Accord a lot better. I mean, yes, it's 204 versus, say, 195 with the 1.5-liter turbocharged engine that's standard on the lower 2 models, but the upper 4 have this hybrid system. Now, in order to incorporate the hybrid system, Honda extended the front end a little bit so they could make more room for a lot of the components. As a result, they cleaned up the front end, so the front end looks conventional but bold. It really looks much better. They also tweaked a little bit at the rear end, so it looks very nice. So overall, there's a upscale look to it, which I appreciate. They also did the work inside. So the instrument cluster and dashboard is at the current design language. So I've noticed that the grille that houses the vents are the same texture as the front grille outside.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But other than that, it's a better vehicle than before. It rides very nice, and I did take it on a road trip. Actually, a couple of road trips, a little extended. And I think that's where it came out. The one thing I've noticed, though, on hybrid systems, especially this particular hybrid system, is we usually experience, on any other vehicle, you usually experience a better fuel economy when you're on the highway. Well, when you're in the city, you have a better fuel economy. When you're on the highway, your fuel economy goes down.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange twist with this technology that happens.
Other than that, I really enjoyed this new Accord.
And what kind of fuel efficiency did you observe?
Oh, okay. I'm glad you asked. At first, it was up around 49.
Wow.
But then it dropped to about around 41.
As you did more over-the-road highway miles, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I took it down from Twin Cities to Austin, Minnesota, out to Jordan. Then the next day I was at the Menominee, Wisconsin for a car event. So again, with all those extended driving, that's where it ended up being 41.
And that's still amazing considering the size that the Accord is now. Accord is a big car nowadays.
Yes, it is.
That's crazy how efficient that is.
Yes, it is. It just reminds me of when I remember the first Accords. They weren't that big. They were bigger than the Civic, which isn't saying much. Now it's about even bigger than a Camry.
Yeah, they're good sized vehicles now. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you had a little bit of time behind the wheel of the Accord. Why don't you tell me a little bit from your experience?
Yeah. So when I drove it, I found the power delivery to be, even though it's the same mechanicals as the CRV, it just felt the delivery was a little bit different from what I remember. I thought the CRV delivered more oomph, more acceleration and power. Whereas in the Accord, you could hear the engine doing some more unusual things with the CVT transmission and it trying to juice the battery and things like that. So it felt a little bit different than the CRV to me. I felt the CRV was a little bit more refined, but it still was a very smooth, quiet, uneventful, basic transportation kind of a car where you don't really need to think about what's going on mechanically. It just takes you where you want to go without a lot of complication.
Even though it had leather seats, although some may wonder if that's real leather or just synthetic stuff. It's a little bit more of a mid-pack car, mid-pack model. So, but yeah, if we had the Touring, then we'd say, oh, it's luxurious because it had a lot more features. When you get into the Touring, add atop of the Sport L. So. And pricing was interesting. It's around $35,000.
Not too bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of pricing, we're going to go into a $91,000 vehicle. Yes. I had a chance to drive a 2023 Range Rover Sport.
And normally you don't get Range Rovers.
Or anything from JLR, as what the company is now called. 4 formerly known as Jaguar Land Rover. Rarely do I get, and this was like, sort of a curveball. Said, hey, we got a Range Rover Sport. You want to check it out? Sure, why not? So I welcomed it. It's okay. So let me back up a little bit about the Sport. Now, don't confuse this with a Range Rover. The Range Rover is a big 3-row, ultra luxury, close as you can get to a Rolls-Royce Cullinan or a Bentley Bentayga type of vehicle. And the average price on those are running in the 150,000 range. Thankfully, we got the Sport, which is more of a concentrated vehicle. I mean, powerful car, very powerful driveline, great driveline. Of course, I was told not to take it off-road. Of course, you can't really take it off-road because the Range Rover Sport is designed more for hauling people, just the 5 of you, because it's so big inside, and whatever you want to throw in that big cargo area. It's luxurious. It's really enjoyable. I loved the Range Rover Sport. And here's a little twist to the whole mix. The quality on this one, exceptional. The last time I drove a JLR vehicle, the drawer behind me was stuck. It was a misaligned door at the factory. And it's disappointing because it was a vehicle that I really had high hopes for. On the Range Rover, I had no expectations. And by the way, those expectations were blown to bits. Still, that particular vehicle, which was an SE, was 91 grand.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
This is not an off-road type vehicle anyway. So,
True.
Yeah, it's more along the lines of going to the club, going to the golf course, or going out to the fanciest place in town. This is what it's made for.
Right. It's really more of a pavement-based luxury vehicle that is just having to be lifted like an SUV.
Absolutely. So one more vehicle I'm going to talk about, and the circumstances was a little bit different than what I usually do. I flew out to Connecticut to do a media familiarization trip, which is an opportunity for journalists to be able to experience a specific destination and write about it. And the experiences are usually aligned with what publication you work for. Now, this is for my day job, which I'm managing editor of. So those were very specific to that particular publication. Now, to make things a little more interesting, I brought in Stellantis, my contacts at Stellantis, to have a vehicle as part of the story. Well, sure enough, they had a 2023 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe in the top trim, which is the Summit Reserve, waiting for me at White Plains, New York Airport.
Nice.
So I drove the entire length of Connecticut in that vehicle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But first things first, I had to stop at Hartford. So, but I will say that this vehicle, I hate the stereotype, but this vehicle is so fitting for Connecticut. It's luxurious. It's American. It's SUV. It's also a plug-in vehicle as well, because Connecticut is one of those states that follow the California CARB emissions standards as well.
Right.
Yep. So the engine is a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, electric motors, and of course there's a standard J1772 level 2 plug that you could recharge the battery on. One of the problems I've had was the charging infrastructure in the Hartford area. As soon as I thought I could recharge this vehicle, well, the charger was broken. It's not Visit Connecticut's fault. It's just what I ran into. Of course, had I known there were some other chargers, maybe out in West Hartford or along the way out, just charge up and hopefully no problem. But, I saw a charger one place I was supposed to stop at. Oh, I could charge it up. Some guy pulled up and was trying to tell me it didn't work. So had I listened to the dude, well, I would have just parked it elsewhere. However, though, it fit the job well. It covered plenty of miles, probably about under 500 miles, to be told. Took it from White Plains to Hartford to Mystic through New London, and then took 95 most of the way till I got stuck in traffic on the Merritt Parkway heading into White Plains, back to White Plains Airport. So, yeah, it did the job. It turned in decent fuel economy, say about low mid-20s.
Not bad for the size and shape of the vehicle.
Absolutely. Other than that, like I said, the Grand Cherokee 4xe, it's one of those vehicles where you have to appreciate where Jeep is going, even though that the bread and butter is Wrangler. But you still have two Grand Cherokees, and we did review the L, the 3-row version of the vehicle. I've actually reviewed it twice since its intro. And, they're really good vehicles, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, we wrapped up the vehicles that we reviewed for the period, but there's more than what we talked about here on victoryandreseda.net. These are some of the highlights of what was reviewed during that last quarter that we've had. So take a gander out there, and also check out the other videos on the YouTube channel that we have full videos on, and you'll get the full lowdown of everything that we've covered. So I think the big message coming forward from this is the voting, that people should be watching for when open voting becomes available, that they can pick.
And when we release the ballots online, don't forget the hashtag #VoteForVody. That's vote, number 4, and VOTY. And we want your vote this year because we don't even know what the 5 finalists are going to be. And we'll be just as surprised as you are. And I think you'll be hopefully going to online to our ballot and be able to vote the one that you want to win the 2023 Victory and Reseda Vehicle of the Year Award.
So with that, you'll want to pay attention to our social media for the ballot of the 5 vehicles that will be voted on by you to be the winner of Voti 2023.
Absolutely. Look out for that.
So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this edition of the Victory and Reseda Reports, and we'll see you in the next quarter.
So long, everybody.